Today, we are going to continue with the second important point that Richards discussed in giving notes on truth that is used in criticism, which may help to prevent misunderstanding regarding to the term called truth. As we have seen it yesterday that there is a difference between scientific truth and the truth used in emotive way. If the truth which is attached to emotive power, if it is accepted, if it is serving the purpose of evoking emotions, then that emotive truth is to be accepted because of its approach. And that's why he has discussed about truth used in scientific sense and truth used in emotive sense. Moving further, the second important note that Richards discussed here is how will you find out the truth? How will you recognize the truth in criticism? And he mentioned that the most usual other sense is that of acceptability. We accept the world represented in the literary works. We always feel, we always find out that truth that is represented in fiction is supposed to be true. We have accepted it. And acceptance is the most important part. Richards here gives an example of Robinson Crusoe, the very famous novel. And if you read Robinson Crusoe, we've accepted the truth that is explained, that is part of Robinson Crusoe. We have accepted it very directly, we have accepted it in a very fine sense that yes, what Robinson Crusoe is talking about is the truth. Whatever things are told in Robinson Crusoe, we have accepted it as a truth. The acceptability in the interest of effects of the narrative, what the narrative is telling you. You have accepted that narrative. You have not tried to relate it with or correspond it with the actual facts. Alexander Selkirk, a person in history, is supposed to or is said to behave like Robinson Crusoe. But when you are reading the text, at that time you are not at all trying to find out the factual relation in real life. You have accepted the truth. Because what narrative is suggesting, what narrative is telling, you have accepted that narration, you have accepted the things said in that particular narration. Similarly, the falsity of the happy ending of Lear, King Lear, or Don Quixote, is actually their failure if you accept it with happy ending. Why? Because you may say, sir, okay, we have accepted it as a happy ending. How you are saying that it's failure? It's not triumph. Why it's not correct? Why it is wrong? Because what you said is acceptability. You are going to accept the narrative, what narrative is saying. Yeah, you are accepting the narrative. But if you are applying a happy ending, then this happy ending is moving on the false track. The reason is that those who have fully responded to the rest of the work, you are not accepting their deeds. Let us make it a little bit clear to you. Let us make it a little bit easy to you to understand. If you say that Lear being a tragedy, King Lear being a tragedy, or Don Quixote being a tragedy, where the protagonist, as per our definition of tragedy, dies at the end of the play. But if you are saying you want a happy ending for that, whatever King Lear is expecting is getting all the things. His death is he's getting out of that pain and the sort of grief that he is facing in his life. That's why his death need to be celebrated as a happy ending rather than treating it as a tragedy. But when you are saying this, or if you are saying that if this is the narrative is telling all those things, we have to accept it. No, because you are not justifying the deeds done by rest of the person to take this particular narrative up to that particular end. In this fictional world, one person is not doing all the activities. He needs support. He needs help of other members to proceed the narrative, to proceed the story, to proceed the action further. And when he was proceeding the action further, at that time, the whole narrative, which is based on that protagonist, and if you are saying that the protagonist died because of the tragedy that has been constructed with its own structure, and he is expecting happy ending and saying that we have accepted it, the truth is that he was free from the pain and grief that he faced in his life after his death. So we have to treat it as a happy ending. If you are saying so, then you are denying the deeds of the other persons also of that particular story, of that fictional world. Because what you are accepting, the narrative which you are accepting, the whole narrative is based on the sort of actions that all the characters are performing throughout the story, in the whole plot. And you are accepting all the deeds of all the characters that are part of that particular plot. And if you are saying that okay, we will accept only the protagonist what he is doing, and then we will not at all pay attention to rest of the characters, then you are going on a wrong track. It is going to be a false understanding, and surely you will not able to understand what it means by truth, because truth is nothing but an acceptability. You have accepted it. And that's why we have to understand, we have to find it out that everything that is coming to us for the sake of approval, for the sake of acceptance, we are judging it on the basis of all the things that are part of it. Now, how the truth depends upon? The truth depends upon, it is equivalent. It is equivalent, my friend, to the internal necessity. Please understand this word, internal necessity. The truth is equivalent to internal necessity or rightness, you can say. Because internal necessity or true or internally necessary things are in accordance with the rest of the experience of other characters also. So how can you deny the rest of the other characters' experiences? Because the whole narration, you know it while you are reading any literary work of art, you know it that it is not based on facts or factuality. You know that it is not real. You know that it is not going to survive if you apply it on real sense. It is not going to be part of reality. Still, we accept it as a true. When you open a book, start reading it, the world is whatever world is coming in front of you on the pages, you accept it as a true sense, in a true way. You are not accepting only one man's truth, you are accepting the whole narration as a truth. Because it is the acceptability, the truth depends on the connection, the contribution, the relation, the accordance, the amalgamation of all the characters coming together. The truth is not of one person. The acceptability is not for one person, the acceptability is for the whole narration. And that's why to on which path the whole action is moving on, you have to accept accordingly. If the whole path is moving on a tragic end of that particular action, then you have to accept that as a tragedy, and that is the truth. But if you are saying no, I'll convert it into an end and we'll say that it's going to be comedy, then no, not at all. Because you are denying, you are not accepting, you are rejecting all the actions and experiences of the rest of the people. And that's why the true in its sense, in a sense that true is internal necessity. And if true is internally necessary, and if true is internally necessary for understanding all the action and plot and accepting and reaching to the sense of acceptability, then we need to understand that internal necessary is in accordance with all the characters, which cooperates in arousing and responding to the emotions that are expected out of it. We are expecting certain kind of emotions to be aroused after reading that narration, after going through that narration. And when it is arousing certain emotions, arousing certain responses to it, it is in accordance with the experience that you got. And that experience is internally coming to us, internally, you can say, crafted in such a way that all the characters coming together trying to give you the experience that is what expected in the whole fictional world. And that's why we need to understand that what exactly I. Richards is trying to put forth, that when you are treating it as a truth, truth is internally necessary. True is internally necessary for any fictional world, which is acceptable, which made all the things acceptable, which makes you to accept all the things that are part of it. And that's why he says that when it arouses our ordered response, the word is very interesting, ordered response. It is the order that is coming from the whole narration, whether to accept it as a tragedy or accept it as a comedy. And we are responding accordingly because it has been structured in that way. When you read any novel, when you read any poetry, when you read any drama or any literary work of art, the ordered responses are crafted by the creative person. And that's why it is internally necessary to accept the true, and true means acceptability. Whether uh, the response of beauty or any another thing. Richards using various literary examples in a way to convince, in a way to justify the argument that truth is nothing but an acceptability. He uses the very famous quote of John Keats, which is part of once again the Ode to Grecian Urn. Truth is beauty and beauty is truth. Now Richard says what the imagination seizes as beauty must be truth. Now here the sense of truth used by Keats is absolutely clear to all of us. What is the sense of truth here? When Keats says beauty is truth and truth is beauty, the things are the word used truth here is responding to what Keats wants to say about truth. And that's why truth, according to Richards, is nothing but acceptability. Sometimes Richard says that truth is sometimes it is held that whatever is redundant or oitus, whatever is not required, not disruptive, is false in the whole narration, is actually false. What is required? Sometimes it is redundant. Sometimes something is not required, but it is there. And when something is not required and if it is there, then that thing is false. It is not serving the purpose. We need to understand this when you are using it in criticism. Which thing is required to accept? Not all the things are required to accept. What is it? Internally necessary. Now, when internally necessary, you need to find out what exactly is necessary. Usually we don't have any crystal clear idea about what is necessary there. Because what is truth, it seems to be beautiful, and what is beautiful is true, what Keats says. This is what Keats has suggested, that what is beautiful is true, and what is true is surely beautiful. So we need to understand this fact. That means certain things which are not required, certain things are not essential. When certain things are not required, when certain things are not essential, sometimes those certain non essential things are disrupting your idea, disrupting the thing, then it is to be treated as false. Who will do this? This can be done only in criticism. If you understand criticism in a proper sense, if you apply truth in criticism in a very proper way, then it is possible for you to understand its real meaning. And that's why he said that he's giving few notes to avoid misunderstanding about truth in criticism. Now, please understand that what we have started with, that truth is nothing but acceptable, acceptability. Whatever is coming into the text, we accepted it. We accepted whatever is coming into the text. We never apply it, or we never try to use it, or we never try to uh, compare it with our real things of life. We never try to compare it with reality. What we try? We try to accept it as it is. But if you are accepting it only for the sake of the chief or the major or the main protagonist, and saying that okay, whatever happens to the protagonist is to be accepted as the whole narration, then what the other characters have experienced, what other characters have done in accordance with the protagonist of that particular story, you are falsifying everything. And that's why true is internally necessary to accept it, because it arouses your ordered responses of emotion. And when it responded to the emotions, evoke the emotions, then we have to realize that there are certain things which are disruptive in the whole narration. Those you have to understand it, those you have to find it. Sometimes it is held that whatever is redundant, whatever is not required, although it is not disruptive, is false. Now, to prove this point, to convince us, I. Richards used an interesting example of one of the very prominent, you can say, essayist, academic, or writer of 19th century, Walter Pater. Because Walter Pater, you can say, a person who is having contributed in understanding of philosophy, who talked about so many art and artifacts and trying to give certain ideas about it. Walter Pater, whose connoisseur, And Richards used an example of Walter Pater. What Walter Pater said, surplusage. Surplusage, the artist will dread that. The artist will dread that as the runner on his muscles. Have you seen a run? The runner will focus on his muscles. The athlete will focus on his muscles rather than anything of his body. If you are an athlete, you want your muscles to be atoned because you can perform well if your muscles are toned. Rest of the thing you will not look at it. Rest of the thing you will not find it. Rest of the things you will not focus on it. Now, Pater using the example and Richards quoting Pater is trying to convince that surplus things which are there, they are not to be taken care of as the athlete is not taking care of rest of the thing to perform well. Surplusage. Look at very commonly saying that what a sculptor used to do, what is the difference between a sculptor and an ordinary man? A sculptor can able to find out the surplus things in the stone and he remove those surplus part of the stone to convert it into a sculpture. He is removing the surplus things. And there are various surplus things. And the artist will dread that. And these surplus things need to be removed. As the athlete is toning his muscles because to get performance, quite good performance, well performance, in the same fashion, the artist will dread that surpluses will not able to give his work as the best performed thing, to perform well, to reach to the objective that has to get it. And that's why if you understand that if you are asking, if you are having an excessive demand from the artist, that you want such things, you want certain things, then you are somehow making the wishes or making your will at a wrong place. The additional thing that you are expecting that it is what is to be part of this, because when critic used to say, when critic used to point it out, it is a common thing that critics used to say that, okay, if this would be the part of this particular thing, then what the results are, now we are facing the results would be the different. Critics used to point out. Critics used to say something, critics used to add anything into it. Most of the time, usually, not all the time. Usually, critics expect that something should be added into it so that it will be evoking responses, it will be adding responses, and this sort of criticism which is making to add something, which is making to uh, give something more, that is what he calls it surplusage. The artist knew that what things are to be removed, and he has removed the thing. If you are expecting excessive things for that, then the acts of retrenchment is at wrong place. You're not accepting as it is. What Richard says, superabundance, superabundance is common characteristics of great art, because something is always added into it, something is given more to understand it, and that's why superabundance. If you understand superabundance, you will find out, my friends, that uh, you are finding out that certain things are excessive in great art. That is what the uh, artist feel, that is what the artist think, that is what the artist expect. So in every great art you find out superabundance. There are certain excessive things, and when there are certain excessive things are it, those excessive things are less dangerous according to I. Richards, because you have to accept it. If the artist added it, you have to accept it. Being a critic, you cannot ask him to add this. It is in every great art that you will find out that superabundance is there. Excessive things are there. They are less dangerous than the preciousness that to contrived an economy which tends to produce, because it is contriving the economy. When it has been produced, everything which is produced carries some sense and some sort of economics with it. It is contriving the economy. Preciousness is contrived. It is less dangerous, no problem, because it is not losing its acceptability on the part of audience. The essential point is whether what is necessary is there or not. What is unnecessary interferes. Whether what is unnecessary interferes or not with the rest of the rest of the responses that you are finding out. You are getting certain responses. Suppose I'll make it a little bit simple to you to understand it. If we see, we are watching or we are reading a tragedy. Again, you will say, sir, why you are giving example again and again of drama? Because we have started it in second semester and we have continued it with poetics. We talked so much about tragedy, so it is fresh in our mind. That's why I'm using the word tragedy here. There's no specified intention behind it that we are using only drama and tragedy here. Now, when tragedy, you are reading a tragedy, you are familiar with the fact that your ordered response, you're waiting for the ordered response, that it is a tragedy and it will reach to a tragic end. How it is reaching to the tragic end, you are reading it. Now, if the unnecessary things are interfering into the ordered response that you received, into the ordered response that you got, if this is interfering into this ordered response, then you are not reaching to its objective. And that's why Richards is saying the essential point is whether what is necessary, unnecessary, or necessary, it has to be in accordance with the rest of the response. If I'm saying that the sculptor removed the unnecessary things from the stone to bring out the sculpture out of it, in that case, he is removing the unnecessary or he is keeping the necessary part only into it because it is giving response to you. So it is essential point is whether the unnecessary, what is unnecessary or what is necessary. If it is not in accordance with the response that we used to get for achieving the objective, then the things need to be accepted. And if it is not in accordance with the rest of the response, the whole thing is not at all better, probably for the extra solidity, probably for the extra thing which it gains. That's a surplusage which need to be part of every great art is to be focused on, is to be focused upon. You have to focus it. You have to realize it. You have to understand it. Now, this internal acceptability, because you have accepted it. Every text carries its acceptability with it. The internal acceptability or convincingness, that every text convinces you, whether it is tragedy, whether it is comedy, whether it is narrating any story to you, what is its ultimate aim, what is its ultimate conclusion is to evoke responses from you. And when it is evoking the responses from you, it is carrying its own methods to convince you. Every text convinces you. So the internal acceptability or convincingness needs to be contrasted with other acceptabilities. We need to contrast it. with other acceptabilities also. Now, this sentence needs a sort of clarification and example. Richards, here to elaborate this statement, the internal acceptability or convincingness needs to be contrasted with other acceptabilities. He he tries to elaborate the whole statement to us. And he used an example of Thomas Reimer. Thomas Reimer is a, you can say, a very important critic and writer of 17th century. And he published a book by the fag end of 17th century, almost in 1693, I suppose. The title of the book is The Short View of Tragedy. Thomas Reimer produced The Short View of Tragedy in 1693. And in 1693, when he produced that book, when he published that book, he refused to accept Iago for external reasons. And the same tone you will find out carried out further by A.C. Bradley also in his Shakespearean tragedies. Now, I hope that you remember Iago. Iago is the villain in Shakespeare's very famous tragedy Othello. He is the person who take Othello to the track of jealousy. He is the only person who converts the love of the Moor into the hate towards this demon. So he is accepted as Machiavellian villain. Iago is the most, you can say, most of the time is said that he is the most brutal villain in Shakespearean tragedy. He is accepted as villain. But Thomas Reimer refused to accept Iago for the external reasons. Why this example appears? This example appears because of this statement made by Richards that this internal acceptability or convincingness need to be contrasted with the other acceptabilities. Need to contrasted with other acceptabilities. So Thomas Reimer has not accepted Iago as villain due to for external reasons. Now, what are those external reasons? To entertain the audience with something new and surprising against common sense and nature, he would pass upon us a close, dissembling rascal instead of an open hearted, frank, plain dealing soldier, a character constantly borne by them for some thousands of years in the world. This is what he observes. Naturally, you will feel about what exactly it means by. Naturally, it makes you to feel it's difficult to understand. It makes you to feel that how can we relate it? What he is saying that to entertain the audience with something new, Iago used various new ideas in the play. And that's why most of the time after reading the play, we can come to a conclusion that how can we call Iago as a villain? If Iago is a villain, then we in real life also to be called ourselves as villain at certain moment because we use time. The very uh, famous things that we used to find out in biblical stories that Jesus asked that the person who would throw the first stone who had not committed any sin in his life. Have we not used the moments in our life to get something for us? A very simple thing. If you are in hurry and if you jump the signal, uh, you broke the law. But you have your justification that why you did it. Do you mean to call yourself as a villain at that time? The whole class is talking with each other while examination is going on. So you also talked with the student sitting behind you. And if the invigilator picks you up and takes you out of the classroom, you will say, "Sir, I am not the only one. All the students are talking. Why you are treating me as a villain?" Because you try to use that moment doesn't mean that you are villain. So for Iago, most of the time, critics used to say that to entertain the audience, he used to do something new. So he did something new there. And he was pass upon a close because whatever he is doing something which is very known to us. In politics, if you want to go up on the ladder, you have to take up the chances. Then the persons who are taking up the chances, will you call them as villains? That is a big question. He's getting close to us. He's very much close to us. And when he's getting close to us, he's simply making you to get entertained because of his new tricks used to achieve his goals, which are common, which are used naturally by most of the persons. He's using foolish people to achieve his goals. He's using rascals to achieve his goals. Instead of open-hearted person, instead of frank persons, instead of plain persons, he used rascals. He used foolish person. Soldiers, a character constantly born by them for thousands of years in the world. Soldiers use this. Soldiers for thousands of years did these things in their life. To win the war, in the warfare, you enter into enemy's camp and try to get the information. And who will give the information? The open hearted person? The plain person will give the information? The fools, the rascals will give you the information. What is going on in enemy's camp? So if he's using rascals rather than plain person, if using all those persons, then what Reimer says, then the truth is this author's head was in full of villainous and unnatural images, then you have to say. The author has planned him. Author has created him. So the author's mind is full of villainous and unnatural images, and that's why he has given this unnatural image. That's why he has given this sort of things to his character. So the internal acceptability or convincingness, you have to contrast it with other acceptabilities. Now you have to put it in contrast. If someone is doing, if something is going wrong, will you contribute into it or will you try to get away from it? If the rule says that you cannot jump the signal, and even if you jumped it, you are convincing it without accepting that okay, I have committed a mistake, saying that what you did is right with lots of excuses. We experience this thing in our day-to-day life frequently, and we used to again and again point it out that okay, what I did is not my mistake. We used to give excuses for that, you know it. And when we used to do all those things in our day-to-day life, you have to put it in contrast with the character that is appearing in front of you. So what Reimer is saying, I will, the truth is that the author's mind is a full villainous and unnatural images, yes, without which you cannot able to bring the character which will create, which will evoke the ultimate objective of what it was expected by the creator at the end of that particular thing. It is this what the creator is expecting. It is this that the creator wants to. And if this is not at all, if this is not at all followed, then how the convincingness, how you can convince it? So you have to put the convincingness, internal acceptability of that particular text in contrast with the acceptability that you are having. Then and then it is possible for you to accept it as a truth. Otherwise, it is difficult for you to accept it as a truth. And that's why Richards is saying that to accept, the most usual sense of truth is that of acceptability. And how will you accept this? With an internal acceptability or convincingness. If you put it contrast with the real things, if you put the in contrast with other acceptabilities, then and then the truth will come out. Then and then you can able to find out that yes, what we are trying to accept is correct, it is not false. And we need to understand this particular aspect, we need to understand this particular idea. And that's why he's saying that this truth which usually misunderstood, truth in criticism is usually misunderstood, and that's why I. Richards is trying to clarify. That's why I. Richards is trying to make it very clear to all the audiences, that all the readers, that in criticism there is a misunderstanding regarding to the word truth, and we have to find out the exact meaning of truth. That's why he has given these notes on truth. Again, he talks of truth by using Aristotelian examples and all those things that we will discuss it in tomorrow's lecture, because uh, it is a little bit of heavy to understand it. And tomorrow we are going to conclude this essay with the third note that he has given on truth, and the remaining aspect of the second note of acceptability, what is mean by acceptability, and how acceptability is part of every text, how it is internally acceptable, how it is convincing, and how the other things which are as a surplusage part of it, you have to understand it, all those are falsified, and the things have to be removed, and to understand the truth in out of it. That is what Richards is trying to bring it out with us, with all the ideas of truth and the notes on truth. So we today stop it with this particular idea of truth, and will continue the discussion on the second note of truth, as it is in more in the sense accepted, used as acceptability. We'll talk it in tomorrow's lecture.